Started. All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the #1 podcast on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you already know how we get down here. Whatever the obstacle is, whatever the challenge is, whatever it is in the way of your success, we are here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. And let me just tell you, this next guest, his name is Douglas Katz. He's the founder of a company named NULU. It's a very unique concept in terms of knives, and he has his background. I'm going to bring him on to explain the background in it for a second. But what I do have to make sure I say before I even bring him on is my time spent as a Cutco cutlery seller. All right,
Oh,
I used to actually sell kitchen knives, and I wanted to make sure we started recording before I actually told him that because when I saw what he was all about, when I saw his brand, I was going back to the times of when I used to, to cut the leather and cut the cut the rope and everything like that. I'm like, this is an absolutely incredible concept because he's taken his military background, things that he would do, from a former veteran standpoint, and created a product that's actually good for people who are working in the kitchen and all sorts of things. So, all that being said, Douglas, welcome to the show, man.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and let's just get right into it because what I do know is coming up with a unique product. And this is the way business works. As a lot of you regular listeners know, I've said it on multiple occasions, as people have been on that has confirmed this, that you don't hit that home run just by waking up. You hit that home run by making a very small, unique concept and just making something, changing something about an existing product, and then putting your own unique spin on it and just relentlessly going out and selling it. That's how you actually hit that home run. So I would love to hear your background a little bit about, some of your time in the military, some of the things that you had
Right.
seen, coming up that made you say, okay, man, if I turn a knife like this and make it like this, then, life will be easier for a lot of people.
Right. Well, I can tell you it was done less deliberately than I would like to take credit for, but I think I learned something about being deliberate
Yeah.
by creating it. So my background, again, pretty typical background, suburban America, grew up in East Grand Rapids, Michigan, went into the
Go
military.
blue.
What's that?
Go
I am
blue.
I am a Michigan fan. My
Let's get it,
joke is
baby.
that Michigan was my safe school after West Point, and my friends who went to Michigan don't like that very much. But no, I'm a big Michigan
West Point.
fan.
Yeah, West
My
Point.
daughter's currently dating an Ohio State fan, so that's always fun.
Yeah.
But so I got into the military via West Point, and honestly, for me, I think that like I always gravitate back to that in grit, problem solving, just common sense and practicality. And that kind of continued into the military, right? You have limited resources, you have a lot of problems to solve,
Yeah.
and everything is unique. And you have some of the smartest, most ingenious people, right? Like my privates would get in trouble, not because they were stupid, it's because they were smart and they would do all kinds of stuff that would. So you really learn that. And then I hate to say it came to a screeching halt, but when I got out in 98, corporate America, at least I feel is not an innovative place these days. It's about acquiring innovation from smaller
Somebody else.
smaller guys who do that. I feel that generally, and I don't get a lot of argument that insurance and all the other things that they use to create indentured servitude to some degree
Mhm.
is part of the problem, right? People can't visualize a world in in like inventing
Mhm.
because they're used to 9 to 5, get a check in the mail, your medical's paid for. But I think that's a fool's folly, right? It's only as solid as the land, till a tidal wave comes over, and we're seeing more and more of that, especially with AI. So for me, I it was more a hobby
Yeah.
that became a passion. So my wife had gotten me a class on blacksmithing, right? On bladesmithing, and I took
Now,
it.
was
And
this during like, does this like, so you're going to West Point and, obviously that's not at all easy road. You're learning a lot of things and they're putting you through a lot of different things.
right,
At what point do you start to get that bug sort of where there's a
yeah,
blacksmith?
that's a great question.
Yeah, because that's a
I
great thing for someone to like, oh man, I'm gonna give my husband a blacksmith class. That's something that not a lot of people really.
yeah, well, and that was a weird thing too. So it started out. I always had side businesses, right? So I kind of tried that, and honestly, what I learned was, well, none of them were successful as they could have been. But I
Mm-hmm.
learned a lot about picking your team and getting a team and getting help.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I tried to do myself. And not only is it very, very hard to do because you're trying to do all the tasks,
Right.
you have groupthink in your brain, right? Like I had some great ideas, but the execution wasn't the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So none of those took off. And really, what it wasn't the invention of the knife. It was starting to reach out, finding people who shared the passion, getting them on board, and then finding out all the resources there. I think really what gets people held up is a lack of knowledge and experience, but also a lack of knowing the resources and just kind of going, well, I mean, right now in the age of AI, you can write a business plan like that, right? You got to understand what went behind it.
One
So
behind it.
I was lucky enough, I went through a military accelerator called IVMF. It used to be called Bunker Labs. And actually, my partners and I are launching a new product that I can't talk about a lot right now. It's not a knife, but I'm going through another accelerator actually called Founders Institute starting in March. And those are exactly what you think. If you're coachable and you can learn something, accelerators are the best way to take ideation into commercialization.
Right.
I'm lucky, right? I had a lot of good people. I have had people who made it far. I was lucky. I created a team out of all really over 50 age people.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, right? There's a wisdom, there's a patience, there's a lack of greed, there's a lot of things that are more indicative of that. So it's sort of like things coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would say is it's kind of like knowing, I'm a kind of I created a knife because I like to cook. But
Yeah.
I'm not a recipe guy. I'm a guy who knows flavor profiles and can say
Right.
that's going to be really good. I think if people can bring that to their business and say, okay, I know what flavor profile this should be, and I'm going to create it from there.
Mm-hmm.
The circumstances of like the knife, the bladesmithing class and all that were really breadcrumbs on figuring out that I'm an inventor and an entrepreneur. And the
Mm-hmm.
knife is hopefully, if it's a single or double, then I'm hopefully behind that gonna, bang one into the stands
Right.
and create some home runs out of that.
So when it comes to the side businesses that you mentioned, and one of the things too that happens all the time is a lot of times we look at something as failure, but we really don't realize it's actually part of the process towards
It
success.
is.
Can
It
you
is.
can you speak to a little bit about, your mindset when it comes to these side hustles that didn't work? What are some of the,
Yeah, yeah. So I
upset
created
and stuff
one.
like that, right? Mhm.
I created one. It was, talk about two of them.
Yeah,
One of
good.
them was a piece of luggage that I was at the airport. I was traveling a lot for work, and people were going back and forth, and I watched their luggage. I'm like, this was before they put in a whole lot of outlets. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about my phone. So I'm
Mhm.
like, what if you put a charger, like a mechanical charger on the wheels? You're
Right.
walking through the airport, you're walking downtown, you're walking wherever, you're
Mhm.
charging a battery that you can then charge your phone.
Mhm.
And I had a team of friends. They were great people. They just were not as committed. So what
Right.
happened was it sort of fell apart. The next one I did was for myself. It was a prepping, disaster preparedness. Really hung into my military experience, but also it was sort of about. Uh, I took an insurance type of view, right? Like you take a survey, and it tells you how prepared you are, how prepared you want to be, and what you need to do to be prepared as. Well, I took it from the perspective of okay, it's going to be online. People go there, blah blah blah, and then they're gonna order their things. Well, what ended up happening, and this is in retrospect, I look back and I'm like, this was more of like a pampered chef thing, right? Because guys like to touch cool tools and guns, and I didn't sell any guns, but right, they like the tactile aspect, right?
Right.
Like I could tell you about this knife. This was one, but holding this knife is super cool.
Yeah, completely.
So what happened to me was I very much was in my own head.
Mhm.
Okay, I understand how this is supposed to go. I didn't think about the consumer. And I should have been more open about it and worked with my friends and colleagues and everybody to. So you're right.
Right.
And at the time, I looked at his failure, and one of my kids was even rough on me at one point. I don't remember which one, but they were really rough on me.
Mhm.
And I've been good now about because when the knife came along, right, there was when they're like, "Dad, that's a pretty good idea."
Right.
And now they're helping me with it. And I think that it really did come down to like, okay, The idea is 10% of it, maybe 15% of it.
Mhm.
The execution, the moving the ideation to a true plan that you can work, and really being honest with yourself. Before there's a third product we're going to launch, and before talking to you, I was actually on with my partners, and we're doing a major pivot.
Right.
And I think people really look at like even pivots as failures. And that's just not the best way to approach it. You
Yeah.
got to be flexible. That's that battlefield thing that we're talking about, right? I was lucky enough never to be shot at,
Right.
but the enemy doesn't cooperate,
Yeah.
right? So your competition and your clients
Mhm.
may not cooperate either, your customers, right? So you have to know, okay, when I'm now faced with something other than my expectations,
Right.
how am I going to deal with it? Because not dealing with it, inaction is action,
I feel.
and that
Yes.
could be pretty rough.
Well, the thing is, I'm glad you brought that up because, again, regular listeners, newer listeners, if you're new coming in here, you got to understand the idea is so small of a part of the process. The execution of the idea is actually what's going to get there. And you need teamwork. You need a team. You need people around you. This is something I'm not talking at you. I'm talking
Oh
with.
no, totally, totally,
Because
man.
I'm telling you, if you guys know, I've had idea after idea after idea, and they have all fallen through in many ways because it wasn't executed the right way. But you brought something up that I want to make sure we don't brush over, which is your kids and how you teach young people. I'm currently a teacher at the school named the Center for Creative Education. I heard you
Awesome.
on a previous show. We're talking about the importance of STEM, the importance of teaching people this creative outlet, this way of thinking of the world, and not just giving them a multiple choice test or giving them some degree and automatically just shoving them out into the real world. Actual tangible skills that they're going to need. Can you speak to some of the tactics or maybe the strategies that you have towards, educating young people
Oh,
that,
absolutely.
college may not be their thing, but hey, they can diagnose what this room is, the number in this room, and they could figure out, all
Yeah,
the things that apply from an engineering standpoint, which is
totally.
that we don't, again, the regular education system does not push on people. You actually have to go out and find this as parents. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things with it. One, I do some writing. I actually recently wrote an article about I'm calling Gen X the Pottery Barn generation. We broke a lot of shit, pardon my French, and we got to fix it. And I think that's these kids. And part of the thing that I don't think is being looked at is we always talk about the failure, the lack of failure, not creating grit.
Yeah,
But I think also a lack of failure gets rid of resilience to be able to look at a failure the way you were talking about. It's
yeah.
a lesson, not a
Well,
failure. So I think a lot of that first thing is a little bit of owning our own culpability, right? Like I do talk to kids and I say, there are things that were done not on purpose. And actually, it's very funny. And this is taking a little side note, but it'll come back in. Even with, because my wife and I both do, we've both been caretakers. I've taken care of my dad. He passed away last year. We're taking care of her folks now.
mhm.
And a lot of people in the boomer generation are in terrible shape. Right now, you could either look at that and you could say, wow, I'm going to blame them, right? Because they took terrible shape and now we're dealing with it. Or you can look and say the landscape was processed food, pharmaceuticals solve everything, technology, right? So they were very much
Right.
as they age products of that. And I think that's how we have to look at these kids, but people have to step up. I've been listening to a lot. I don't know if you listen to a lot of Scott Galloway. He's
No.
fantastic. If your listeners are entrepreneurial and are connected to a lot of what you're talking about with
Mhm.
young people, especially young men,
Scott
he
Galloway.
is amazing, amazing, amazing. He's a prof at he calls himself Prof G. He's a professor at NYU. I have become really addicted to it because I like what he is saying about we need to, if we don't want a whole population of incels and people who can't create and execute, then we should keep doing what we're doing.
Right.
If we really want this generation to be another greatest generation, we can make that happen,
Right.
but we have to own it. So I actually talk to a lot of my friends' kids, even, or my kids' friends, even, scratch that. Um, when I go up to visit my son at college, and they respond to some of the cool stuff. Like they were like, wow, you're making a knife. That's the coolest thing ever. And when you get
I
that
can see what you're
opportunity,
saying.
you got to take that opportunity. And, it's funny. I've even got some feelers out to do some adjunct professorship too, because I think that's the way to give back. You can write a check to an organization, but spending the time is huge. And boy, I respect that you do that. That's amazing.
Man, you're giving, I mean, the thing is, You're giving me like actual goosebumps when you're saying that because a lot of, especially in the industry I'm in, so much of it is about some certification, so much of it is about some master's degree or whatever it is. And I'm not going to tell you that that's not important, but when you get someone like you that's actually bootstrap something, built something with your own hands, and then you get in the position where you can actually teach people, that's what young people want to hear from. That response
Right.
you get, and even then the kids that I deal with, let's say I come up with some project, some current event, and there's some project that happens, they're so engaged in the learning element to it
Yep.
that you wouldn't. I mean, geez, I'll just show you. We had them. Hey, this Takis, one of their favorite things.
Yeah.
Takis, just make a Taki thing. So now we know how to make the bag. There's the plastic. They have the little cotton balls inside of it, but this is their favorite snack. All these things that are training the mentality.
Right. Well, and what I love is, and you actually talked about this, is like the simple things too,
Right.
right? Like I think people look, and right now, and this is a problem, frankly, I think in the startup space that I'm seeing is there's a lot of money always in tech.
Hmm.
Everybody wants the unicorn. They want the ROI. Tech is an easy way to do it. So even a lot of my West Point connections are all tech. Like I go to conferences and it's like, oh, you're making a product that's quaint, right? It's almost like that. And what I tell people, I think right now, I think there is in the zeitgeist a lot about wanting to bring manufacturing back here, which I think is fantastic. But it's the people who are doing everyday things that know the way to make the everyday things safer, more efficient, or whatever. So we do a lot of work actually, or we kind of put it on hold until we get our product in. We're going to be able to meet our Kickstarter in March, and then April, we're going to have productionized, people can order them. But part of our getting to where we are has been working with disabled communities because they're a lot of our target market.
I saw that.
The innovation down there is amazing.
Hmm.
What they do with pool noodles and PVC and duct tape to
Hmm.
solve a real world problem, and these people are not engineers.
Right.
So I think everybody has that, and I've been really wanting to, again, I'm doing some writing, talk about creation versus consumption. And, when we talk about kids, it kind of goes full circle to say, get out of the consumptive economy, right? The attention economy is consumptive, and everybody's talking about the attention economy now. And that's the next step, right? Now we've gotten pissed off at food producers, we've gotten pissed off at
Yeah, because we
pharmaceuticals,
get
we've gotten pissed
that's
off at
coming up.
insurance,
Yeah.
right? So who's the next people? Well, I had heard on a podcast, it's the attention and the addiction economy.
Hmm.
So I think if we can get back to creation, and the beautiful part about it is never before have you been able to, if you have an idea,
Hmm.
you can use AI to develop it, determine the commercialization, all that. You can research to an amazing extent. You can do design stuff. If you're worried about patents, you can go to Google's search tool.
Yep.
The US patent one is terrible. The Google search one is awesome. When we were starting out with NULU, I spent an evening and looked at like 4,000
Hmm.
entries to see if there's anything close. That was really enough for prior art. But
Yeah.
if you think about, like, if you're sitting here, I remember I got my MBA in 2000.
Hmm.
Writing a business plan back there was like, competition, right? And you're going through all this stuff, and now it's much faster. The other thing, your listeners, if you haven't talked about it, the SBA offices
Hmm.
in their area, there's things like SCORE, which are old guys like me who are out to do that. Like there is
I've
so
done that
much out
actually.
there, so much out there, and that's where if you take the technology, the
Uh,
ability to go to like when we were starting out, we did all our own prototyping, but if I had needed to, this is the knife, this blade here.
mhm.
We ordered it online. We ordered a blank online, and I did it in my because it's really hard to grind.
Well, that's actually, I'm glad you brought, you can keep it up there because I was going to
Yeah.
ask you what makes the actual knife unique, and I want to
So
give you.
it's what we call force transfer geometry, right? And
And hold up,
I've
pause.
gotten beat up about that.
For you students out there that hate math, he said the word geometry. That stuff you blow off. That stuff that is just.
Oh,
He said the word geometry, and it's
yes.
part of
Well,
the.
right.
It's
It's.
all part
I
of it.
think it's breaking down math and
Yeah,
going. You're not doing trigonometry.
exactly.
So what it is if you think of a circle and this being the point of engagement,
Mhm.
you get the whole arc of being able to cut. So I can. One, you can see I could cut without having to bend any of my extremities.
Hmm.
If I were standing, I'll stand, it's like this,
Hmm.
right? And you can cut. Now, this isn't just for people who are disabled. That's a large part of our market. You, if you don't have any upper extremity issues, will like it better. Here's the great part. We like to say, how do you NULU, right? Because you can grip it like this. You can grip it like this and chop, right?
Ah,
You can
okay.
slice, you can chop, you can slice. This little corner here is great for opening something in the slicing. You
Hmm.
can chop this way. If you turn it, you're cleaving and you can precision cut and julienne.
Hmm.
But this, I didn't forge, I didn't take out a hammer and doing it. I ordered a blank. I round this myself, and this is 3D printed. And this is where I think people are encased in their perceived limitations, if I could put it that way. Um, with a Harbor Freight near you, you can buy about any tool cheaper than you could anywhere else, right? If you don't know, like you can buy a nicer tool later. If
Hmm.
you're like, hey, I want to start making stuff,
Yeah.
buy some cheap tools, get started,
Yeah.
and go from there, right? And that's where, and there's also, I know in Chicago, where I'm about an hour and 15 minutes outside of Chicago, in Chicago, there are even shared workspaces with CNC and all this stuff. And this is where what I would love your listeners and viewers to know is the only thing stopping them could be them,
Right.
right? And I know you
Well,
probably talk about that.
yeah, but what was it about the people have disabilities that made them your target? And I asked that because I remember back during my Cutco selling days, we obviously our target was college student. Well, no, the target wasn't college students, but I was a college student, so that was
Right.
really the kind of people I knew. But we had
Yep.
something called a spatula spreader, and this
Yep.
spatula spreader was amazing because it made your peanut butter jelly sandwiches. You
Yeah.
can cut that's all you would need to sell to a
Yep.
typical college kid. So
Yep.
my sales were majority of them were just the spatula spreader to other, college friends. But when it comes to you, you know your niche market and the people that you're looking to serve. What was it about the folks who have disabilities that made it so that was going to be
It's
a
because
target?
I'm one of them. So
Oh, no
the
good.
the, the origin story is I was having shoulder and elbow issues. I'm a disabled vet. None of my upper extremity issues are. I haven't gotten a rating for them, but you can bet between the Army for 9 years and I played rugby for West Point, but also I played years after that. Like I just got beat up in service of a
Oh, you
lot of
stayed
different things,
active.
among
You
them the
stayed
Army.
active, right?
So I was having a particularly bad flare up before I had my shoulder reconstructed,
Mhm.
and I couldn't swing a hammer. I couldn't really work on knives. And at the same time, I like to cook. As I had said kind of in the beginning, like I'm a flavor profile kind of guy, mix stuff up, but I'm a pretty decent cook.
Right.
And with wanting to stay in shape, I'm 54. I like to also own my nutrition. I couldn't cook as well as I could. I was starting to notice I was eating more processed food or whatever. So I was like, all right, well, what could I do? I was hanging out in my shop and I saw a circular saw blade. I don't throw anything away either. If there's creators out there
And I
who
and I
make
hate to
stuff,
pause you there because I mean I feel like watching the Apple movie where you have the CD player and the Steve Jobs
yeah,
guy. He was tough getting in the CD player and he's like, you know what? I don't want to have to do this. I didn't mean to cut you, but it's making me
yeah,
think
no, no, no.
that
Yeah, but it's
it's making me think of like Steve Jobs and he's looking at these CD players all bulky and then boom, we have a iPhone.
right. Well, and that is though where like people shouldn't second guess or write off their inspiration,
Yeah.
right? And for me, like because and it's unique to making knives, right? Like I just keep stuff around for handles and all kinds of stuff. But I was looking at the circular saw blade and I had made a pizza cutter earlier and I was like, well, wait a minute, there's more to this. So the first one, I have what I call the NULU Museum. It's out in
Mhm.
my shop. I have all the different prototypes that we made out there.
Ah,
And the inspiration sort of came.
right.
And I think people need to let that happen a little organically too.
Mhm.
Like I am a big, again, I didn't go out to invent anything. Like my plan
Oh,
was,
no,
you know what, I'll
but
work.
it's actually just living, right? It never,
Right.
oh, one day I just want to invent. It's just going through life organically.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like we went through this first phase of like inventing a whole bunch of stuff. I've my first partner and I was my design guy, and we were like, oh, what about this and what about this? The great thing came when then we started talking about commercialization.
Hmm.
And I think that's the other part, right? Inspiration plus the execution part is looking and saying, is anyone going to buy it, right? Like when I was making this knife, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I can take a magnet because I use a lot of magnets to hold the blade while you're grinding it. But if I
Mhm.
put a level on it, I can like control the angle that I have it, and I'm like, this would be great. I'm going to sell it. And then I was like, well, how many knifesmiths out there? Like, really? Can I sell it? Or is a guy going to go, wait a minute, I can buy what you did, or just glue this on the way you did? So it's one of these things where innovation may not be invention, and the invention may not be commercialization. And
Right.
going through all those and not getting disappointed or being your own worst enemy when you do it. But I think part of this all is, hey, if you're sitting down to watch Love is Blind or whatever the hell you watch, my
Yeah.
wife watches that, so I got to tease her. But if you're sitting there and sort of just passing time, consuming, you're never going to get there, right?
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
always something to do. And what I think is, and I've learned this is, it's so don't eat the whale at one sitting or whatever, but, pick something to work on a little bit every night,
Exactly.
right? So, we use a CRM and, I'll kind of break it down like, hey, today I'm going to just research and maybe reach out to commercial potential clients and keep it small. And because I think what happens is people are like, oh, okay, I'm tired from work.
Hmm.
I'm just going to sit down. They start scrolling. 2 hours later,
Hours
they've been
later.
looking at Facebook or TikTok or whatever,
Yeah.
watching TV, yet
Yep.
they never have time to work out and never have time to start a business.
Exactly. And
And
that's
and I
on you,
think,
folks. That's on you. I want to make that's on you. That's nobody else's fault. That's not who's in office. That's not your governor. That's not your mayor.
right.
That's on you. You have to condition your mind to say something, even if it's just literally one thing, something has to get done today. And you keep
Mhm.
adding up those somethings, eventually you're gonna get there. I cannot stress that important, just the importance of doing something, just one thing one day, every day.
Well, and time, I love that you talked about every day because, just I'm in kind of a point in my life where I'm more introspective. Again, I was a caretaker. I've seen old people pass. I see my kids. And I wrote an article about every year of your life at the point you're born based on actuarial tables are 1.3% of your life.
Yeah.
So 5 years, basically 5% of your life, more or less.
Hmm.
And when you think of it that way, as spending and not sort of this amorphous journey,
Yeah.
you can do it more deliberately. And time even, it accelerates, right? We're
Right.
kind of time travelers, right? I'm 54. So for me, I may be more up to like double that every year. So if
Right.
people really want to start a business, one, I don't think you're ever too old. I'm having a blast at 54, but people need to start looking at it as
Mhm.
a a resource that will be squandered
Right.
if they choose to squander it.
Right.
Um, and I think that's true of anything, right? Like again, I think it's true of working out. I think it's true of a hobby. And what I will also tell is have hobbies because that also is the hotbed for innovation.
Yeah.
And
Pressure's
it's
off and
also,
you're active. Yeah, your brain.
or you look at, let's say there's something you've always wanted to do, like maybe you become a runner, but you look at something differently, right? There's people who've run all their life. They're in this paradigm. I started making knives, and 2 years after it, I made this.
Exactly.
And every other knife maker was making very traditional knives.
Right.
Nobody was saying, hey, let's invent a different knife. But I didn't know any better. So sometimes I think I did martial arts for a long time. I did Aikido for a long time. And there was this concept of the beginner's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't care how long you've been in business, bring the beginner's mind to what you are creating with
Yep.
the wisdom of your experience, because the other Achilles heel of all these entrepreneurs is, one, being afraid to talk to anybody, but two, being not coachable,
Right.
right? Like not
Thinking they
thinking
know
that
it all.
whatever anybody can tell you is better than what you know.
And I'll tell you, folks that have that closed mindset, eventually people move on. The real idea, the ones that have innovation, if you're so stuck in your mindset that you can't listen to somebody else or just take some tips from somebody else, they will move on and find something better. So,
Well,
you
and they may end up, when I started this, I said the hell with it. I reached out to a couple of really well-known people in the knife industry or people who were at the C-suite
Mhm.
at big knife producers. And I'm like, hey, do you want to I was just like, what the hell? I'm going to go for it.
Exactly. I would
And
that's good
one of
because
them,
you're in the industry. Obviously, you want to pick up some.
Well, right, but the fear is always, are they going to screw me over?
You're gonna right.
I found the complete difference. The I reached out to one of the judges on early seasons of Forged in Fire. Guy
Mhm,
was the nicest guy ever. I reached out to him because when I was making knives and I was getting really, really discouraged, he had some great videos on being a maker but I reached out and said, "What do you think of this?" He gave me several hours of his time. And this guy is, in his circles, a celebrity. I reached out to the CEO of Buck Knives, who was the nicest guy. He actually was like, "We can't produce it. I love the design." Reached out months later and said, "Hey, I may have found someone to introduce you to."
mhm,
One of the other guys I reached out to is now part of our organization and is preventing us from making, in my opinion, potentially fatal, catastrophic decisions.
hmm,
So it's you gotta be out there and
mhm,
you gotta go out and just say, again, if you think it's gonna be this one thing that you can do
mhm,
ever in your life, maybe you manage it different. But even for the younger people who I think are always looking for the big payout, maybe, right? Like
mhm.
their heroes are, the tech guys, right? Like these guys who have made billions of dollars. Um, but you don't have to do that to be a successful business, right? Like I think you can
Those are
scale
the
it the right
stories that
way. You
make the
can,
mainstream media, but the stories that don't are the ones we're talking about. People just doing the small things, just like you're doing.
right, right, right. And you never know where it will go. But the other part is when you're in the thick of it, get out there. Go to meetups, go to any kind of stuff. The other funny thing that I learned way longer than I should have is when you go to founders events
Hmm.
with any kind of, let's say you're going through an accelerator or whatever, a lot of them are open events.
Right,
You find out that you can really talk freely at those because most of the people there have their own idea that they think is better than yours.
right.
So now they'll give you all sorts of great feedback and all sorts of great stuff associated with what their knowledge is, or they give you a great informed opinion because they're starting a business too of like good things you can do. I remember I was at an event. This guy was from like New Zealand or Australia, and he had this. It was an interesting concept, but they must not have chambers of commerce there, right? And it was some type of thing that would connect people with business. I'm like, well, it sounds like your client is actually chambers of commerce
Hmm.
and not the. He was
Oh,
like,
you
what's that?
told them. Right, right, right.
Right. So then he was like, oh, well, that might have been something that helped this guy. Like there was and I think going out there and just doing it,
Yeah.
that's where you end up finding like some great ideas and great ideas for yourself. And it's fun. I love it all. I really do.
It's a
I
journey.
was
You,
I
you
kicking
gotta
myself for not starting earlier.
you gotta love that journey. I do want to be very respectful of your time, Douglas. Now, you sort of already mentioned what's next. Can you kind of speak on a little bit, or at least what you're allowed to say now about
Oh
what?
yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I do want to end on one thing.
Mhm,
If you want to help this younger generation, hire them
mhm,
and mentor them. The other thing I do like to talk about is all the complaints out there are about work ethic, about them wanting to deal with things on their term.
mhm.
Frankly, they saw all of us get screwed. '08,
Yeah,
early 2000.
yeah,
So I think the best way to do it is stop complaining and criticizing and teach them how to do it and meet them where they are. They're pretty smart in not putting up with a whole lot of bullshit.
yeah.
Like the what we complain about our jobs, they get it. So what's next is we have a roadmap for the NULU,
Mhm,
um, accessories that are specific for it that also extend the functionality. We have and this was in our Kickstarter, we have a cutting board that has a bowl that's the shape of the Nulu,
Oh,
which
the
means you can
bowl.
cut
Nice.
in it. If you cut a carrot, man, my dogs like it because they love carrots, but carrot flies across the room. With this, it stays in the bowl. Things like that. We're working on a lot of different handle designs
Mhm,
as we go in some of the gift space. Handle designs that are going to be more higher end wooden handles so that you can give it to someone. Right now, we want to be like the Glock of knives, man. People pick it up and they just know it works.
right.
But different handle designs that might help. Like one of my issues, I have really bad arthritis in my hand,
Mhm,
but my arm is kind of okay now. Well, for me, it's grip. It might not necessarily be strength of my arm.
mhm,
There's different there are different requirements from a handle perspective for that. Um, Different use cases, right? Sport, out in the field, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
We have a lot of different things on the design thing. In other products, we really like to say adaptive, assistive, adjacent.
Hmm.
So this being adaptive, we have come up with some assistive applications for this that may affect some of our design, like
Yeah.
how we decide to go in other branches. But then we look and say, well, wait a minute, because what this is adaptive, right? So if we look and go, okay, it's adaptive, now it's assistive for people who don't have upper extremity issues. Is there anything adjacent?
Hmm.
Are there things that we learned from this design where we can say, wait a minute, that applies to this? It's a
Hmm.
lot of what people do with technology, but they don't do it necessarily as much with consumer goods. But that's what we do with every one of our products with the main core team.
Right.
And we're put together, we're organized as a venture studio at the top that shares legal, operations, marketing, um, strategy and business development, finance, and sales.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like if we create another product, we're creating it and getting it to a certain point within that venture studio, and then either one of us or we'll go on a search for a founder in residence is where our vision is
Hmm.
to say this is the right person to do this brand. And where I would like to go, again, this is pie in the sky, but who knows, is take these people, especially veterans,
Yeah.
especially young veterans, maybe disabled ones, get them through one of these accelerators with one of the products that we want to do. And at the end of that, have a executable business plan that's
Mhm.
fundable, that then we can sort of grow into that space. So it's definitely a bigger picture that grew out of NULU, where we were like, wait a minute.
Right.
Now, the other thing that we did, you asked about market. We started out binary, disabled, non-disabled.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's not a binary model. It is a spectrum, it's a scale. And
Mhm.
everything, if you look how things are really rolling out these days, it's a lot harder to have a black and white argument about things. So what we did is we looked and we said, well, wait a minute. Disability really means an inability to accomplish a particular task or set of tasks. It's where I went back to my Army training. Army, I don't know how the other services are, but when you train to a task, condition, and standards. Can you
Right.
complete the task with those conditions to the standards that are put out?
Hmm.
If you can't do that for a kitchen task, you are by definition somewhat disabled. So we don't like to talk about disability. We have something we've called the ability curve. And what we have done is we have said, you're somewhere for a task, you're somewhere between 1 and 10.
Hmm.
And a child to use a regular knife in the kitchen is definitionally disabled. They don't have the strength, dexterity, coordination,
Hmm.
or, you know, temporal lobe to be able to, or front cortex to know it's dangerous.
Right.
They are by definition disabled just by being young.
Right.
Older people are on the other end of that, right?
Hmm.
And all along that, right, you might have someone with MS and Parkinson's who has a way more steep ability curve throughout their life. You may have someone like me who kind of goes in and out of being more and more disabled, but is sort of on a downward trend as I age.
Hmm. Yeah,
So what
I would have never said you're disabled. I wouldn't have known that unless you said
well, you
something.
know what, and that's where, especially right now, where I hear the disability thing thrown a lot with hiring
Hmm.
really frustrates me because what we happened onto was you're likely going to be more disabled through your life than not.
Hmm.
And so is everybody else around you. And if you can't do a task at a certain time and cannot connect at an, empathic level to the people whose life it is all that time,
Hmm.
something's wrong with you. So that's why we're trying to change the whole disability argument to say it's on a spectrum, it's on a curve.
Yeah.
And what we were trying to do with that was better understand our market, but also be able to communicate to investors a much larger target market.
Exactly.
Because then we go from the person with Parkinson's
Right.
to the person who's my age, who's got a lot of bumps and scars and problems, who
Hmm.
may be taking care of an elderly parent
Right.
and might be looking and saying, well, wait a minute, I can give my parent more independence. I can give myself a better trajectory because I'm not using a knife that's going to hurt me
Right.
and hasten my issues. So what we found was that the application is to everybody, but now our problem is how do you message it? So from one problem and a solution comes new ones.
Mhm.
But you had mentioned, how do we know our niche? And again, this is where the advice I would give to your listeners and viewers
Mhm.
is start to use AI like
Like
go
a
watch Iron Man.
yeah,
And
like a
and
friend. I
and
use
and
it. I use it as if they're like a proofreader. I use it as a friend. Like
I use it as a proofreader, but when I'm ideating, and,
yeah,
and I and I, and I hate to admit this to your viewers,
yeah.
but like I have a couple places. I think I have like a hot tub spa, like,
Mhm.
and I call it my think tank, and I'll have AI running voice, and what I found is who's the best at it? Tony Stark,
Mhm.
right? So start thinking about your AI like
Oh yeah,
Jarvis,
it's coming. Yeah, because he's
right? So
oh,
what I do is I talk to it.
man, I've never heard the Iron Man comparison. That's a good
I
one.
don't anthropomorphize it, but what I say is I'm like, okay, this isn't about it coming up with ideas for me. And
Yeah.
you may have discerned at this point that I'm super ADD, but I like going back and forth with it, and it does get better. You're teaching that model
Uh-huh.
how to work better with you. So I'm not saying I'm Tony Stark, but I think if people can channel that, all of a sudden the creative capabilities
Hmm.
come out of the walls, right? They know what they know, and AI creates this great environment to learn what you don't know or apply it in a certain direction, and then say, okay, what are your limitations? Where do I like there are times I ask it, okay, how should I, like, what manufacturer should I talk to? How are tariffs going to affect me? There
Yeah.
was a interview that I listened to. I don't remember who it was with, but this guy was saying, hey, I use it before I go into a board meeting. He was like a CEO. And he
Hmm.
goes, I'm like 95% accurate.
Hmm.
This is where, where you won't lose your job in the new economy is this, right? This, and what's funny is people are holding on, right? They're
Hmm.
holding on. Like I joke about the Titanic. I watch that movie sometimes, right? And like, well, wait a minute, man. They're waiting for stuff to float up. Go build yourself a raft,
Or something.
right? So
Go.
if you're on the sinking ship, man, you know, like,
Yeah.
so, and it's easier said than done, but I do think that more people than not, if they could ever get health insurance squared away,
Hmm.
that wasn't the thing keeping people in corporate America. You could see a resurgence of things like after World War II, 85% of businesses were owned by, small businesses. We can recapture that if we want to. I would love to hear somebody talk about that in the political arena because that will be the new economy. And if we can fix the PTO, this is another thing that I really, really want your viewers to think about. Intellectual property.
Hmm.
Everybody will say, go get a patent, and you should. But you got to know, does the person know how to write a patent for your art? And your art could be making an aluminum can or making a knife.
Yeah.
But the other part about it is your patent isn't a force field. The PTO today has something called the PTAB, the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. It was created, well intentioned, I believe, during the Obama administration. But when it was created, it got created, manned, and all the ways it works by big business, that revolving door.
Hmm.
So let's say you have a patent. What can happen is, let's say I'm like, well, I don't want you to have that patent, but I didn't come up with it sooner. So I'm going to challenge you in the PTAB and I'm going to say that it was obvious. Well, guess what? You don't have a choice on whether you go to the PTAB or whether you go to a court of law to be able to defend your patent. Your constitutional right to property that you created right now is as good. It's as good as this paper that I have right here,
Yeah.
because you can be dragged into the PTAB. You are forced to defend yourself based on their requirements, where you have to hire someone who's specialist. I think it can go as up as $100,000 or more after you've already paid for your patent that was given to you by the patent and Trademark Office.
Right. And
Now, understand if you're a patent appeal judge who doesn't understand the art, if you saw this, you might say, well, yeah, it is obvious, right? Of course, of course. Like a knife maker could say, well, I was going to do that, so it's obvious. Well,
mhm,
it is obvious after I invented it. So I recommend everybody join. I'm part of a nonprofit called usinventor.org to
mhm,
get smart on this stuff because there's a great story. There's a woman named Molly Metz, world-class jump roper. She won several world records,
mhm.
created a jump rope that was amazing. Um, God, what is it? What sports? Oh my God, I'm trying to think who stole who took her. Um, I'm not going to waste time, but she was. People should look at her story
Mhm.
because she got her patent invalidated. She had a employee. She had a company with 40 people.
Right.
She was making all sorts of money, and now is down. I think three or four. Has spent I think short of a million, but up there, and has been screwed over. So people's perceptions with stuff like this is they'd be like, well, I came up with a great idea and I'm going to protect my IP.
Mhm.
The real world is not that. It was Rogue Fitness. Rogue Fitness
Rogue.
was, I believe, Rogue Fitness was a licensee that then turned around and
Oh, yeah.
challenged her in
I
the
have
P
a fitness
tab.
I have a fitness background, so that's actually I'm glad you brought that. That happens a lot in the industry because they're very easily duplicatable things. But I
Well, but
do
even then,
good.
she lost her patent
Mhm.
because Rogue Fitness went in and said, among others,
Yeah.
said, well, this is obvious. I don't know if it was the bearings. Not, well, this is obvious.
Mhm.
She then had her patent invalidated. She
Mhm.
appealed it. And during the appeal, and I'm probably not getting this right, people should read her story. The judge was sitting there from home, dogs barking in the back, and this was her life's work. So the other thing I would tell people is I think they look and they're like, I'm going to get a patent and I'll be safe. And first, come up with a business model that is executable, that is hard for other people to steal. The business model. Secondly, lean into being the founder. If
Mhm.
you've created something that has a great origin story, storytelling is now, from what I understand, I'm starting to see it, part of it, what brings investment and what connects the customers to the individual. So there's a lot being written that branding is important, but your own personal brand is important. So getting that out there because someone invalidating your patent can't steal who you are. I'm a unique character, right? I created the knife for me. Because of that, that's a barrier to entry to other people. And then also, when they're ready, find somebody who can do it right, who can protect their IP,
Right.
because it would be tragic if they thought, hey, I'm safe.
Right.
And then they find out that either the attorney they used wasn't in that art or they get dragged into the PTAB. So I know I went in a certain direction, but not enough. Every one of the accelerators that I've been through, people were like, oh, you just get a patent. It's like not that easy. You really, really have to be careful with IP. So another important thing
And what's the best way for people to reach out if they want to hear more from you?
would be do a search.
Mhm.
I would say LinkedIn is always the best place to start. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're not on LinkedIn, what the hell's wrong with you? And then, but I'm on everything else. Um, I've got a Facebook page that's my business. I've got not enough content up there. I've got a YouTube channel where I'm doing demos of the knife. Um, I've been on some other projects lately, but if someone puts in my name or Nulu Knives, they're
Right.
going to find me. NuluKnives.com is our company. The Kickstarter is still up until we fulfill it. They can find information there. And most things will lead people to a link tree.
Mhm.
I can give you that also if you've got a description when this is published.
Yeah.
My link tree is where I put, yeah, I do a lot of writing. Also, I do some writing. I've done some white papers about our business. And maybe that gives some people some inspiration. So I'll make sure I get that to you as well.
I'll include all that in the show notes as well. So, Douglas, the way I close out all the shows is want you to use your imagination a little bit. You got about 60 seconds. Pretend that your first day in West Point, you're brand new to the real world. You just graduated college. You're wet behind the ears. You don't know what to expect. I want you to pretend that Douglas has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially
I will
close.
tell you, and again, I'm stealing this 100% from the podcast I listen to. Your success will be in the agency of others.
Mm,
Period. End of story. Like I went through the academy, and I served with some amazing people. Every one of them who succeeded, it was through the agency of others. Find people who can help you.
Oh,
Again, these young people, get them involved. Like, that's how you will succeed. Every other one of my businesses failed until I found the right partners who shared the vision. And that's when it takes off and you become a different person.
and again, have absolutely nothing to add. You guys know, as regular consumers, the promise, the guarantee of this show is to help you through whatever situation you're going through. So, all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.